Okay. Holy crap. Not too close. Kusani, good afternoon. Kakinagitata miskatna kapise nasyak. Hitsegagon, animutamak, mine base paketnamak, anotska hisigak. Good afternoon, Tansi, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional, unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Treaty 1 First Nations and the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Dakota, Dene, and Niuean nations. Our First Nations people have inhabited and cared for these lands long before today. I want to acknowledge and thank the leaders who are standing here today with the families and loved ones of Rebecca Contois, Mercedes Myron, Morgan Harris, and Buffalo Woman today. Chief Kyra Wilson of Long Plains First Nation, Grand Chief Garrison Settee of MKO, Grand Chief Jerry Daniels of Southern Chiefs Organization, and Regional Chief Cindy Woodhouse and Treaty Chief Gordon Blue Sky. We are here to show our dedication and support for the families who have missing or murdered loved ones in the Prairie Green Landfill. Cambria Harris, Elle Harris, and Jordan Myron, and the families. Back in December 2022, the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs stood with the Harris and Myron families to call on the Winnipeg Police Service to reconsider their decision not to search Prairie Green Landfill for the remains of Morgan Beatrice Harris and Mercedes Myron. This was due to the fact that Winnipeg Police Service hosted a press conference on December 6, 2022 to explain why it would not be feasible to search Prairie Green Landfill in West St. Paul for the remains of Mercedes Myron, Morgan Harris, and Buffalo Woman, victims of an accused serial killer. The reasons given included the 34-day timeline between the deaths and police awareness, the compaction and amount of the mud, and refused the amount of asbestos and a high volume of animal remains, which allegedly make the remains from human remains. But the First Nations community would not stand for those explanations. We knew that position was sending a dark message to First Nation women and girls. How do you look at these young girls in their eyes and tell them you're sorry, but you won't even attempt to recover their mothers who fell victim to a serial killer? They were in mourning, yet back in December, they had to stand up and beg the Winnipeg Police Service to find their mothers. Beg governments to help them find justice. We knew that human beings deserved the effort, no matter how dismissal or difficult the task may seem. It was and is unnerving that anyone would create unmarked graves in these landfill sites. Letters and a proposal were sent by First Nations to the Government of Canada calling for funds for a feasibility study. As follow-up, while we waited on Canada's response, the AMC and Chief Wilson created a landfill feasibility study oversight committee that had members from the Implementation Committee, the Winnipeg Police Service, the RCMP, the City of Winnipeg, in the province of Manitoba. A wide range of very knowledgeable individuals have been meeting regularly to work through the details of how to do this study and who we have to engage. From this committee, a smaller technical subcommittee was created to work on the study with monies received from the Government of Canada. This technical working group was led by Dr. Emily Holland, forensic anthropologist, and Mr. Christopher Duke, Rocky Mountain Forensic Consulting. And I want to thank them for their dedication to work long hours on this research and data. With the help of those who sat at these tables over the last 5 months, we have been able to finalize the Prairie Green Landfill Search Feasibility Study final report, while providing the victims' families involved with the care, consideration, involvement, and empowerment we envisioned from the beginning. So, egusani to all of you for your continuous support in helping ensure the families had access to elders, to ceremony, and mental health supports. We thank you for that. A good deal of effort has been put into this feasibility study, also by the loved ones of these 4 women. The family members of Mercedes Myron and Morgan Harris attended almost every meeting, including the technical subcommittee. They reviewed all our documents and communications. We cannot thank them enough for their commitment to see this process through while grieving. The family members were given an opportunity to obtain a comprehensive overview of the report, but as you can imagine, the details are hard to read, especially as a family member of the victims we are searching for. So in keeping with the AMC's commitment to practice a family-centered and trauma-informed approach, we would like to extend our sincere gratitude to those who have respected the family's wishes to be left alone over this last week to process the document until this time. It was unfortunate that this document was leaked to the press, and we had to scramble to ensure that we were able to come and to be able to present as such. It was and remains very important for us to honor the family and that time to process this heavy document. This is not to say we haven't been anxious to finish this final report, as we knew that the families have been patiently waiting for the findings so that we could begin the work to bring their loved ones home. In this regard, the Technical Subcommittee Landfill Search Feasibility Study final report has been completed and submitted to the Oversight Feasibility Study Committee, the families, and the Government of Canada. And we are ready to share the findings today. The study has 2 main objectives: to determine if it is feasible to search the Prairie Green Landfill for the remains of Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and Buffalo Woman. And if such a search is possible, how could it be best done? How long would it take? And what would it cost? Using the findings from our feasibility study, we proved that a humane search and recovery of Prairie Green Landfill for Mercedes Myron, Morgan Harris, and Buffalo Woman is feasible. Although the search is feasible, we must mitigate consideration health risks to these search and recovery efforts may go forward without hazards. The report has outlined how the search could be done and what the costs will be. Through definite research, the projected search timeline could take between 12 and 36 months. The associated cost of these timelines would be between $84 million for 12 months and $184 million for 36 months. But I want to remind everyone here. You cannot put a price on the lives of First Nation women or the horrific and profound loss their families have experienced. These women are mothers, sisters, cousins, and aunties. They were here and their lives mattered. These women have been denied the opportunity to live out the rest of their days. And as a result, we have all been robbed of the gifts they can no longer share with the world. The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs would like to make it thoroughly clear that if a search is not carried out, it will demonstrate to all First Nations across Canada that this government condones the despairing act of disposing of First Nation women in landfills. It breaks my heart to say these words, disposing of our women in landfills. Grandmothers, sisters, aunties, uncles, cousins, friends have a dream of finding their loved ones. These women we all loved, they were cherished. Families should not feel like the odds are stacked against them in bringing closure to their grief. As part of the work of this final report, there were also a number of recommendations put forth based on this research and study. Number one, there needs to be increased funding for social supports and culturally appropriate social programming for First Nations and Indigenous peoples, specifically MMIWG 2S+, including addiction rehabilitation programs, affordable housing, mental health supports, and care and culturally connectivity. Two, provide additional funding to Indigenous homeless shelters to help them transition into safer living conditions. Three, make GPS tracking mandatory in garbage trucks for all waste removal companies in Canada. Four, ensure all garbage trucks have rear-facing cameras that allow operators to see what is pouring into them. Five, install video surveillance of landfill entrances and exits. Six, it is essential that smaller municipalities, communities receive support funding from the appropriate ministry to make these changes. This study is just the beginning of this journey to bring Morgan, Harris, Mercedes, Myron, and Buffalo women home, and all the many women that have been missing for a long period of time in our country of Canada. Based on this final report, we want to work with Canada to prepare a proposal to access the appropriate funding support for the required infrastructure, professional searchers, and training needed to sort through the material and conduct a search. Our next steps include the submission of a proposal to Canada to conduct a Prairie Landfill Search Feasibility Study that has now been submitted to Canada for their review as well. We shall not have to march through the streets every 5th of May calling attention to the high rates of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. We have been facing this crisis for decades. Everyone, First Nation person, can out of a face of a name of someone that is either missing or murdered, and that is not right. In closing, we need to respond with urgency, and First Nations need the resources to protect our women, to protect our girls, to protect our daughters, to protect our grandchildren. The safety of our First Nation people need to be at the top of every level of government's priority list, now and moving forward. Egusane, kinanas kumit na wow, kay sinsuta wiek. Egusane.
Language, Crunchy. So good afternoon, Bonjour and Miigwech, for joining us here today as we gather on Long Plain First Nation for this important conference. I'd also like to welcome everyone and acknowledge Treaty 1 as we are on Treaty 1 territory. I want to extend my appreciation for everyone who is here with us today as we discuss the findings of the Landfill Search Feasibility Study. I want to acknowledge our elder, Leslie Spillett. Thank you for the prayer. I also want to acknowledge our family members of Rebecca Contois, Maureen Harris, and Mercedes Myron. And as you sit here today with us, and I just want to acknowledge the strength and the courage that it's taken you to be here today. It's been a long journey, and you've really had to stand up against a lot of systems that put barriers in front of us as Indigenous women, as First Nations women. So I acknowledge your strength in being here today. I just want to say miigwech. I also want to acknowledge, the family members of Buffalo women. We don't know who that family is yet, and I feel confident that one day we will find Buffalo women and we will know who her family is. So I want to acknowledge Buffalo women here today as well. So as we gather here today on Long Plain territory, Treaty 1 territory, to share the findings from the technical subcommittee, it has been quite the journey to get this report completed, and I'm grateful for the work that these committee members have put into this study and into the final report. It has been several months, and it's been a lot of work, and I can only imagine how much work it's been for the families, being a part of all these different meetings and bringing forward your journey, your story, and that takes a lot of courage. So thank you for that and your input on the feasibility study. We wanted to ensure the quality of the study was never sacrificed for our urgent need of getting the search and recovery efforts underway. It was a difficult balance as we were all eager to bring our sisters home as soon as possible and by any means necessary. And what I will say is that although we did have to complete a feasibility study, we always knew from day one that it was feasible. And that's why we are here today, to continue sharing that message to the greater community that it is feasible to look for our Indigenous women when they go missing or they are murdered. I also want to acknowledge and thank all of you professional and respectful media personnel. You've honored our requests to give the families their privacy as they absorb the findings in the final report. And even just reading the report, we do know that the report was leaked to the media, and I know that the media did reach out to the family members, and we did have to put out a statement asking for that respect and that privacy while the family members were able to go through the report. It is, as many of you already know, a heavy report with difficult and graphic details that such a thorough report must hold. And that's speaking to searching a landfill for our family members. And it was a difficult read, and I know that for myself, I had to put it down once or twice, and so I do acknowledge, media giving that respect after that statement was made. As Grand Chief Merrick has shared, the projected timeline of the search could take about 12 to 36 months, which is a considerable amount of time, but there is no time that we have in terms of restrictions or limitations on looking for our loved ones and our family members. It will cost between 84 million to about 184 million. It is a considerable amount of money. However, these women are our family members. They are from our communities, and that everyone needs to come together to look for these women. And it's not just the federal government. It also needs to include the city of Winnipeg and the provincial government. Everyone needs to come together, and we will be asking everyone to come together. Our women and our communities and our families deserve justice. As First Nations, we deserve justice and security in our territories. And as the federal government, we look to you to support the work that is needed. If it was your sister or your mother or your auntie, would you be standing here with us fighting for the feasibility of finding her too? We as a committee have put forward our intention to go ahead with the search. We have found the best course of action. We have the support of the Prairie Green Landfill to operate a search, and we have intelligent and determined people who will work with Canada to draft a submission to the government to fund this search for our missing loved ones. As already has been mentioned by Grand Chief, the report has been submitted, so we will be expecting that support from all levels of government. I want to share that I am proud of the work that this committee has done for the families, the people of Long Plain, and this committee. We have implemented what we set out to do and done so in a family-focused and trauma-informed manner. You know, we try our best to support families through such a difficult process, and it's definitely a learning curve and a learning experience, and it's not something that we should have to go through. And I'm really grateful that we have such a great support sitting around this table, but also around the families as well. I want to state that the recommendations from the subcommittee are ones that we have been asking for a number of decades. Crisis after crisis in our First Nations are proof that these needs are being unaddressed for far too long. It all boils down to creating a safe space for First Nations women, for First Nations families, and First Nations communities. It has gone on long enough, so long now that we need to add video and extra measures that if bodies are disposed of at landfills, we may find them sooner before we end up in another horrific situation, such as this, where at least 4 women have been left in such a horrible place. I just want to say thank you for being here today and to be able to share this message to everyone that is watching and that is listening, that we are going to look for these women, and we are expecting that all levels of government support this search, the search through the Prairie Green Landfill, but also the search of the Brady landfill. As everyone already knows, that there is Camp Morgan that is at the Brady landfill, and they've been asking for this work to be done as well. I acknowledge the work of the families that are doing that right now. I just want to say thank you, everyone that's been involved. Thank you to the Grand Chiefs that are here today for your support, and Regional Chief, I appreciate you all very much. I love you all very much, and I just want to say thank you again to everyone. Miigwech.
Well, good afternoon. I want to thank the speakers before me. Thank you, Grand Chief. Thank you, Chief Wilson. Thank you to our knowledge keeper, Miigwech, for your prayer this morning. Thank you to my colleagues for sitting here, for being with us, my brothers, and to each and every one of you for being in this room today, for telling these really hard stories, and these hard messages that have to come, that are coming through, and to the family that you have to, these young women that you have to sit here and listen to this about your mothers and your sisters and your aunts. And so my thoughts today and my prayers today are with everyone who is living with the pain of a missing or murdered family member. And no one should have to go through what you and your loved ones have experienced. I think it's a very important step that the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs and each and every one of you on the committee, as well as Chief Kyra Wilson, organized this feasibility study. And I thank the federal government for providing the funding for it. The technical subcommittee has provided an estimate for recovering the victims of horrible crimes whose loved ones are suffering. The subcommittee also made various recommendations, which I'm sure the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, family members, and government authorities will carefully consider. My thoughts today are also focused on why the families and their loved ones are in this position in the first place. Time and time again, we see criminal acts fueled by values so hateful and extreme that Indigenous women can be murdered and literally thrown away. It appears that the horrible violence of a killer has been compounded by the systemic discrimination that are way too familiar with, that lies at the root of the challenge that lies ahead of us. It is only because of the bravery of families and because they insisted on having their voices heard, and due to the advocacy of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs and everybody else that's here today, including Southern Chiefs, MKO, Chief from Broken Heads here, Chief from Long Plains, and the support of the federal government, that we even have this feasibility study. So it's time for authorities in Manitoba to step up. I ask you to take note on how much energy First Nations people have had to expend to get this step completed, and that's not right. We should not have to fight for action to recover our loved ones. The reality in Manitoba and elsewhere across Canada is that the cascade and acts of racism, sexism, and systemic discrimination put the lives of Indigenous women and girls at risk every day. And when the crimes take place, too many times, families are not listened to or are treated properly during investigations. I'm very sorry to say this, but that is what we live with every day. So I'm going to continue to state the obvious, the reality that we don't have. That Indigenous women need police protection and humane treatment in death, just like any other woman. Crimes against Indigenous women and girls must properly be investigated and persecuted. And crime scenes related to the deaths of Indigenous people must be properly investigated and they be protected. Families of victims must be treated humanely and with respect and care. When authorities do not communicate in a timely way with victims' families and don't respond in a timely way or don't properly explore options to recover the remains of our relatives, they are effectively saying that First Nations people don't matter. In this case, I don't see how government authorities can just continue on and dump more garbage on this crime scene. This is no longer a landfill. It appears more likely to be a crime scene with people in it, according to police information. When authorities respond with, "we can't," or that it costs too much money, they are sending a message that Indigenous women are expendable and placing us outside the society that are charged to protect. This horrific crime and this horrible situation of determining next steps are the product of a cascade of explicit and systemic discrimination raining down on Indigenous women and girls. First Nations should not be ignored or have to struggle to be heard and to have appropriate action taken. Family members have had to fight the powers that be every step of the way, and that's not right. First Nations should not have to be the accountability mechanism for authorities at all levels in Manitoba when crimes against First Nation people take place. If we have to, we'll keep doing that. We'll get the change that is needed. The feasibility study is a step in this tragedy. It provides information and recommendation, but we have more to do. I encourage everyone to work together, to listen to the families and devise a strategy and an action plan. Whatever the plan is, it cannot be to simply keep using the Prairie Green Landfill and dishonor these women by placing more garbage there. We have been talking about crimes against Indigenous women and explicit and systemic discrimination against Indigenous women and girls as a root cause of violence against us since at least the 1990s in Manitoba. In this case, the poor communication with the family members of victims and the ongoing struggle to be heard or recovered of their loved ones is evidence that we have not made enough progress. Discrimination is real. It is the legal obligation of every jurisdiction and policing and justice authority to root it out, not deny it. Discrimination cannot be denied as a root problem when exactly that has confirmed by the courts, the Manitoba Justice Commission, the Manitoba Justice Implementation Commission, the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People, by the National Inquiry into Indigenous Women and Girls, and a whole range of international human rights bodies, the United Nations Committee on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, excuse me, the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous People, to name only a few. All have supported what Indigenous people across Canada are saying. Indigenous women and girls are the targets of racist and gender violence crimes. And we have a fundamental human right to life, to safety, and to security of the person. This means we have the right to be protected. We have the right to have crimes against us fully and properly investigated. We are entitled to have the remains of our loved ones recovered. We are entitled to be treated with respect in death. We are entitled to have crimes against us persecuted. Anything less is perpetrating the very entrenched discrimination we see every single day. Having to fight for all these basic human rights in 2023 shows that discrimination is a major human rights issue in Canada, and that must be addressed. Miigwech, thank you.
Let's see. Timak, Nitisanak, Niwago Maganak. This afternoon, I am here as a representative of 26 chiefs that are in full support of the families from Long Plain First Nation that are looking for closure. And that closure seems to be a very insurmountable task. But nevertheless, with great conviction, I believe that it must be pursued. No matter what the cost is, the families of the missing women is more valuable than any kind of dollar sign that is proposed in any feasibility study. There is no cost or value that is too big to be able to support an atrocity and a tragedy of this nature. And I sit here with two of my fellow leaders, Grand Chief Daniels and Treaty 1 Grand Chief Gore Blue Sky, fulfilling our role to support our women leaders. Our traditional role is to protect the land, protect the women, protect the children. And we are in full support of these leaders that have spoken and articulated so well what needs to happen. To find a way forward is not easy, but we will find it. To honor the spirits and lives of the Harris and Myron families, because it is important for us to realize this cannot happen anymore. This should not happen anymore. Those of you that have lost a mother can go to a gravesite and place flowers and do some reflection by a beautiful gravesite. But for those sisters that are here and those daughters that are here, they cannot do that. They cannot do that. And that is one of the greatest tragedies that our people face when it comes to murder and missing Indigenous women. The grieving process is never normal. The grieving process is never complete because of the way our sisters have been disposed of, the way that our sisters have been brutally taken from us. But whatever it takes, we will support Long Plain First Nation. Whatever it takes, we will support the Harrison Myron family and the Contois family. Because I believe that this has come too far. It has come too far. And our people need to know that we have leaders that will step up and be those protectors that we're called to be. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being here for these families, because they need our support, and MKO stands with these families and with AMC, Long Plain First Nation, Carwilson Chief. We stand with you. Kinanaskimit now. Nagusay.
I thank our Creator for a beautiful day. I am Grand Chief Jerry Daniels. I represent 34 First Nations in southern Manitoba, the Anishinaabe and Dakota peoples. We're here supporting the families, supporting the solutions that are being presented here to deal with what has occurred, which is absolute tragedy. It is a reflection of our society's illness and our society's unwillingness to tackle the recommendations from MMIW report and to move on them in a priority fashion. Now we're in a place where we have, a terrible crime that has taken place at the landfill. And so now you have, an opportunity to review. Canada, the province, our treaty partners have an opportunity to show that they understand the importance of dealing with what is happening right in front of us. And that is that our women are being disposed of in the landfill. And Canada has to respond in a positive way to the recommendations that are coming from the committee here. They have to show that they care. You cannot dismiss something so tragic for our society. You have to take leadership because the rest of Canada is watching. The people throughout our society are watching, and they need to see that this is a priority and that Canada is going to respond. And also that there's going to be preventative measures going forward. And that, I think, is what Grand Chief Merrick had shared, that there are recommendations around surveillance, and preventing our women ending up in these places. So those are two things that are coming as recommendations here. One, to go through the landfill and find our women, find our relatives. And two, take action to ensure that this doesn't happen again. And I would also suggest that the changes in police force oversight be moved expediently, because we have to have our own officers involved in the fact-finding and in investigations. It's quite clear to us that there's an insensitivity there, some recklessness there, and I think that has to change as well. And I think that those are areas that have to happen quite quickly if we're to show to the rest of Canada that they really care. And a lot of us here have lost a lot of confidence in Canada's ability and willingness to respond and take up its responsibility to protect our families, protect our women. So I think that what has been asked for here is not, beyond the scope of what should occur. So we support the calls from Chief Wilson, and Grand Chief Merrick and the committee, our families, and what they're asking for. And we hope that happens quickly. Miigwech.
Bonjour. I'd like to just, on behalf of myself, Chief of Broken Ojibwe Nation, Gordon Blue Sky, and our membership, extend our sincere condolences to the family of Mercedes Myron, Morgan Harris, and Mushkade Bejike Kwe, Buffalo woman. As Anishinaabe people, we look at these families as being our families, and we're impacted the same way. I'm a proud father of 3 daughters. I am a brother to 4 sisters. I am the nephew of 6 aunties, and I can never ever imagine experiencing what the families here are experiencing, and would never want to. And of course, I'm here as a Treaty 1 representative in regards to our collective responsibility to our territory to seek justice for these families. Because it's not just a matter of us acknowledging Treaty 1 in all these different levels of government, which I hear every day, everyone acknowledging our territory. But you can't acknowledge our territory in our traditional ways and aspects without acknowledging and currently ignoring the call to action that these young women here at the end of the table are calling for their mother. Reconciliation, this era that we live in, again, can't go forward productively without being held accountable for the call to actions that are being brought forward today. This is what reconciliation looks like. It's what's outlined in that report. Colonization has had many, many, many impacts on our people, but we can't just ignore those impacts without providing any sort of solutions. Canadians and Manitobans I know out there support the call to action that we have here today. So miigwech.
Hello. Bonjour. My name is Cambria Harris, West Flying Sparrow Woman. It's well known why we are here today, and in a black and white society, Indigenous women are known to have a red target on their backs, and that has been well known for a very, very long time. And the tragedy that took place back in December was a clear outline of how the government has shown time and time again that they do not care about our Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirited. These last 5 months, we've been working endlessly with Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs and our families and various members of the community as well to bring these women justice and peace, to bring them home. And today, I have the honor of standing alongside the family of Mercedes Myron and my family and the victims' families as well. I would like to pay respect to Moshkade Bishike Ikwe, who still remains unidentified to this day with no real known location. This feasibility study is 55 pages long, and as it should be, but no amount of words on paper can give you enough reasons as to why you should search for our woman, because it should have been done on the first page. We shouldn't have had to have done this in the first place, because this isn't the first time in recent decades that the government has told our families that they will not search for our Indigenous women and men and girls and Two-Spirited. And this is a story that everyone in our community is affected by time and time again, and it affects us deeply and personally. And I wish others could understand the hurt and the emotional turmoil it causes when you tell us you will not search for our loved ones, and what the message you are sending to greater society when you announce that to the public as well, and the message that you send is that you do not care about our Indigenous people and that it is okay to continuously dump them like trash. And that's a gruesome and a very, very dangerous message that you are sending to not only our Indigenous community, but greater society as well. And we as an Indigenous community and as a society need to do better to protect each other and our Indigenous women and our men and our girls and our boys, because the government has been failing our families for hundreds of years. And when does it end? When does it end? And that time is now. The younger generations and the Anishinaabe people are here, and we are here to tell you that we will no longer be told what is and what is not feasible, because you cannot put a price on human life when it comes to entire communities and families affected by this genocide over and over again. And if you want to make a better example, you need to start listening to the victims' families and stop making us come up here for these heartbreaking and gut-wrenching situations, because that is not right. And you know, it's so heartbreaking that we have to come here and we have to stand here and we have to plead to have our voices heard, not only for ourselves, but for our mothers and for our sisters and for our aunties. We have no place to go to lay flowers down. We have no place to go to send our condolences or pay our respects to our mothers who we have lost. And so I ask that the federal government in the future finally steps up or steps down and starts listening to us, not only as the victims' families, but as a community, because we will be heard. Miigwech.
I just want to say first, thank you to my family sitting here with me today and the ones that couldn't be here today, Morgan's 2 other children, for entrusting me with the responsibility of sitting on the Landfill Feasibility Committee over these last months. I was there for most meetings, and it was really nice to see all the landfill committee members on the technical subcommittee just really coming there with good intentions and doing their absolute best work for each and every meeting, and being so respectful and empathetic even in the midst of difficult topics. I want to thank all of the committee members for that and making it a safe place for me to be at all the meetings, so I could, you know, take that pressure off the rest of the family so they could do all the amazing hard work that they were doing at the Prairie Landfill, at Camp Morgan. And, you know, fighting for not only our family, but every other family who has, you know, women or members of their family that are in the landfill. And that's such incredibly hard work that they had to do each and every day. So I just want to say thank you to them for all of that hard work, and to all the committee members, and especially to, you know, Elder Leslie Spillett for always being there at the meetings as support, and to Grandma Shingoose, and to my cousin Kyra or Chief Wilson for all the support behind the scenes and outside of the committee meetings. And I had an opportunity to speak with Minister Miller yesterday on behalf of our family, and he asked what our stance was after reading the report, after seeing the budget and the potential health risks involved, and I let him know that our stance remains the same. It has not changed, that we want Morgan home. We want her children to be able to have a place to go and see and mourn and grieve their mom. And we acknowledge the cost those are big numbers. We acknowledge the potential health risk, but we know that there are preventative measures we can take. And if we do not search, if we do not push forward, it does send a terrible message to us as her family, her children, to Indigenous peoples, Indigenous women, Winnipeg, Canada, the world. It sends a really horrible message that we don't matter. And that's not a message we're willing to accept. So that was our stance to him, is that we will push forward.
Hi everyone, my name is Melissa Normand. Morgan is my first cousin. I'm auntie to my two beautiful nieces to the left of me here. This has been quite the fight. You know, when Morgan went missing and we were notified back in May of last year, and we looked because we wanted to believe that we would bring her home. And like my cousin said, with her conversation to Mark yesterday, Mark Miller, that actually I was kind of appalled that he would even ask such a question. Where was our family stance? Where did we stand after receiving this report and reading it and digesting it and picking it apart to really ask us if we still wanted to go forward? I just can't even imagine. To think that we were going to say, oh no, it's okay. We're going to leave Morgan there. Absolutely not. It's disgusting. So we stand together. We stand with our Myron family, and we're going to bring our women home. Morgan and Mercedes are going to come home. Thank you. Do you want to say anything? Okay. She's good. She doesn't want to talk.
My name is Jordan, sister of Mercedes. As you can imagine, our family has had an extremely rough few months. We miss Mercedes so much. Breaks my heart that I don't have a grave to take my niece and nephew to this Mother's Day. It's really hard to tell them that I have nowhere to take them. Our women don't belong in the landfill. They belong to have a grave. They're not trash. It shouldn't be a question whether to search or not. Let's not fail these women and let's bring them home. Thank you.
Your sister want to speak? No? Okay. Okay, that concludes our, we'll close off with a prayer, and then we'll give an opportunity for questions. Bonjour. Let's offer prayer to our Thank you, Elder. Before we start any asking of questions, I just wanted to acknowledge some people that were on a technical subcommittee. The co-chairs, Dr. Emily Holland, who is a forensic anthropologist from Brandon University, and Mr. Christopher Duke from Rocky Mountain Forensic Consultant. And the regular members was Kirsten Witwicky, the Harris family representative, Donna Bartlett, the Myron family representative, Leslie Spillett Elder, and Kristen Flattery, our woman coordinator, who did such a good job on behalf of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, and Ryan Schneck, a fire commissioner from the Manitoba Office of the Fire Commissioner, Shannon Kohler, Assistant Deputy Minister from the Environment and Climate, Nada Suresh, Environmental and Climate, Izzy Abrahams, Vice President, Government and External Affairs from the Waste Connections Canada, and Chris Spicer, engineer from the Canadian Region, engineering manager from Waste Connections in Canada. So those were our subcommittee members for the technical subcommittee. And for the oversight, the Landfill Search Feasibility Study Oversight Committee, the chairs was Grand Chief Kathy Merrick from the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, and Howard Burston, Executive Director of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. The co-chairs were the family members, Kristen Witwicky, Harrison family representative, and Donna Bartlett from the Myron family representative. And the regular members was Chief Kyer Wilson from Longplay First Nations, Sandra Delaron from the MMIWG Implementation Committee, Kristen Flattery, Owen Coordinator, Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, Elder Leslie Spillett, Elder Florence Painter, Sergeant Alex Bear from the RCMPT Division, Community and Indigenous Policing, Ryan Schneck, Fire Commissioner, Office of the Fire Commissioner from the Province of Manitoba. Frankie Schneider was the Assistant Deputy Minister, Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Affairs from the Province of Manitoba. Cecil Swaleson is the manager from the Indigenous Relations City of Winnipeg, and Cam McKidd is the inspector from Division 42, Forensics, Intelligence and Technology from the Winnipeg Police Service. So just wanted to acknowledge them. Who's that?
Grand Chief Merrick, at this point in time, the Executive Council from the Government of Manitoba has issued a statement saying that they're going to review the document, review the report. Do you have any stance on the fact that the government did not openly support a search now that it has been determined to be feasible? What's your response to the fact that the province did not openly support it now that it's feasible?
I'm kind of surprised that they didn't, because they had representatives on the oversight committee, and that they were be able to be relayed that information. And it's unfortunate, because the province is just as well responsible for our people as the federal government.
Grand Chief, what does a search look like based on the feasibility study? What could it look like, and when could we potentially see what happens? In the feasibility study, it's a big document. It's a 55-page document, and what the hopes are is that once it's approved, once the federal government approves the feasibility study, we'll start the work with the landfill with Chris Pfizer, who's the, not Chris,
Emily Holland is the forensic anthropologist who will be doing the work alongside with the landfill, Prairie Landfill. And that there's startup costs, of course, and there's going to be a facility within the landfill where they'll be able to conduct the work from that point.
Did it speak about what type of search would work best in this situation?
It spoke about the landfill, that it would be on a converter belt, and that we would hire people to be able to do the work, that they would be trained to do the work, and to be able to look for our deceased people.
Chief, in your own words, how likely is it, do you think, that the landfills will be searched?
I'm pretty optimistic. I have faith in the government that they will do this in the right way and for the right reasons for our women, and that there's over 4,000 women that are missing and murdered in Canada. And for our province to be able to start this process, it's a big thing for Manitoba. We have the highest population of Indigenous people in Manitoba. 22% of the national Indigenous population live in Manitoba. So I'm very optimistic that the federal government is going to approve this document and that we can be able to start the work.
Do you mind clarifying the next steps if the federal government approves the document? The next steps towards, I guess, applying for funding or securing funding for research.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Do you mind clarifying the next steps when it comes to seeking funding for a search?
So this whole document went to the government, and they provided for the feasibility study to ensure that we completed this document. So we forwarded it to the federal government, to Minister Mark Miller's office, and that they are looking at it. And I'm very optimistic that they are going to approve the work that needs to be done.
I wonder if anybody from the family might be willing to speak just on how difficult this week has been to process this massive report of 55 pages.
Did anybody want to? Did you want to? Okay.
Well, it's a feasibility study, as it should be. It should be 55 pages long, and if not longer, it is to ensure that we can look at all possible outcomes to bring our women and our family home. And this is the beginning step, and grief has no timeline. And when you have nowhere to go to bring your family home, you aren't able to grieve properly. And so when the feasibility was completed, it was very surreal, because you're closer to retrieving your missing loved one, but you gotta hope that someone else does the right thing, and that is all levels of government and society. So this last week, I could imagine, has been very tough for all of us, just as the last 5 months has been. I would never wish this upon anybody, and I wish people could walk a day in our shoes just to see how the Indigenous community feels. And while I would never wish that kind of tragedy upon someone, I invite other communities and other nations to finally come together and stand with us and see what we as a community go through, but also come see the beautiful and the positive sides of it. Because we are more than that, and when we come together in unity and in strength, we can put an end to what is happening. We just need to finally acknowledge it. Thank you.
Yep. What do you hope, you've been very vocal about your experience around this, along with this feasibility study. What do you hope other families who do have missing or murdered Indigenous loved ones get from knowing that this work was done with this landfill?
When people tell you that they will not search for your missing loved one, you don't have to take no as an answer. And That's why we have our communities and why we have our families to come together with us to bring our calls for justice and our voices forward, because this is not only about having our voices heard, but about giving a voice back to these women whose lives were tragically lost. And sorry, what was the question again?
What do you hope other families
Yeah.
get or feel
Right.
from seeing what's happening today?
I hope it inspires you to come out finally and tell your story, because like I said, grief has no timeline, and sometimes by coming out and talking about these situations, it can help give society a better depth of what we go through, but it also helps us relate to each other and come together and see what we can do to address this situation. And so I hope with the amount of work and the amount of efforts that we have put forward over the last 5 months, as well as having our voices heard, I hope it inspires others to finally come forward with theirs. And if they suspect that their missing loved one might be in a landfill, whether it be the Highway of Tears, anywhere on Turtle Island, I believe that you have the right to ask for a call for a search. And I ask that in the future there are more culturally sensitive approaches to go about this, to avoid a tragedy such as this happening again.
This has been 5 months of a lot of work to get to this point. What if the federal government doesn't move forward with the search? What would that mean for you?
Do you want to say?
We don't think of it as that.
Yeah.
You know, the right thing to do, the human thing to do is to look for them. Like we said from the very beginning, we knew it was feasible, it can be done. So it's in their hands now. You know, the work, I'm
Wording that you got from Mark Miller yesterday, I'm wondering if you could just talk about that.
well, to ask such a question, right? To ask even in regards to, you know, the hazards involved, the costs, you know, and I won't lie, I read that whole thing. We got it a week ago. When I got to the parts where it spoke about how much it's going to cost, I flipped right past it. I have no interest in knowing, you know what, because you, exactly like we said, you do not put a dollar amount. We're talking about my cousin, their mom, her sister, you know, laying in a landfill. And am I upset? Yeah, I'm very upset that he would take 10 minutes of her time to ask such a question. So do I hope he does the right thing? Yes, I think he will. I'm confident that they will. Because exactly what we have all said. What is that saying to the rest of the world, right? Yeah, we're not trash, you know.
What would the message be to Danny Smythe, given the fact that he was the first individual to kind of say that this search was impossible? Now, a study, an expert study has determined it is possible. What would your message be to the chief of police?
I won't comment about Danny Smythe. I'll leave it as that. Maybe Cammie wants to. There you go. Get it, girl.
So, a lot of people don't know that I believe Danny Smythe is actually the head of Police Chiefs of Canada, and Danny Smythe also claims to be an MMIWG advocate. And while the Winnipeg Police Service does work with various organizations, they need to do a lot better in the future to start acknowledging the calls of the families and a more culturally sensitive approach than presenting a PowerPoint comparing, practically as the forensic anthropologist puts it, apples to oranges. When you compare the Prairie landfill to the Prairie Green, they're two very different things. And there is a decision to search for one woman, who is Rebecca Contois, two who they refused to find, and one who still remains unidentified, and that is Buffalo Woman. If you want to go forward to the true path to reconciliation and addressing these 231 calls to justice and addressing this national emergency of MMIWG2S+, then you need to do the right thing, and you will not sit down with another family 4 to 5 years from now and tell them that you will not search for their missing loved one, whether that be in a landfill or anywhere else. Thank you.
Yeah, because this fight is not just about our family, their family. We're talking right across the board, right? All of our missing women that are out there that have just vanished. So we're being that voice for everybody.
With all the work that was done in terms of developing a feasibility study, we realized as well that in the deceased Tanya Niebenak, there was a little search that was done at that landfill at that time, and I think it was a 3-day search for our missing loved one at that time, and we didn't want that to happen this time around. We wanted to ensure that the work is going to be done. We wanted to do it right, where we were able to develop a feasibility study to ensure that the work be done right. We had all the supports from Dr. Emily Holland and from the owner of the Prairie Green Landfill. They're all on board to be able to support us. We went to visit the landfill, we took the family there, so we've done a lot of our due diligence as to what we wanted to ensure that this feasibility study and what the contents of it was be approved. And like I said, I can only reiterate what the family is saying in terms of money shouldn't be a cost. And it's time that this is done. And it's time that we ensure that we don't forget about our loved ones, and that there's so many out there. And this is just a beginning. We're just opening a Pandora's box in terms of our lost and our loved ones that are out there, that are still out there. So we need to continue the work on as the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, as the regional voice for the 62 First Nations in Manitoba. And the majority, a lot of our women come from our communities, and so we have to protect them, and we have to ensure that they are that they be looked after. And like we're very hard in terms of our criticism against entities that should be there helping us. And so we're here today. We had a feasibility study that was complete and that was submitted to the Government of Canada, and that we're gonna speak loud if they don't approve it, but I'm very optimistic. Money's not gonna be a problem for the Government of Manitoba when it comes to First Nation women. Like that.
I just wanted to, make a comment in regards to the question about what if the federal government does not support the landfill search. From the very beginning when, the information was shared with the families that their loved ones could potentially be in the landfill, and then, there was comments made by Winnipeg Police or Chief of Police that it was not feasible. I know for myself, I didn't care if somebody said that it wasn't feasible. We were gonna do it. There is nothing that is going to stop us from doing that work. And just like Grand Chief said, I am optimistic that, the federal government will support this landfill search, as well as, the province and the city of Winnipeg. Everyone does need to come together. But at the end of the day, no matter what it takes or what it's going to cost, we are going to do that work. We are going to look for our loved ones. We are going to search the landfill. No one is going to tell us otherwise. We are going to do that work with or without you. And if you're going to support us, we appreciate that. We're grateful for that. And if you're not, then get out of the way. Yeah. So I just wanted to say that work is going to happen no matter what. I just want to, reiterate that, we had a plan on what we were going to do, how we were going to search the landfill within days. We already had a plan, but then we were asked to do a feasibility study, and we already knew it was feasible, but we did it anyways. So here we are. It's finally complete, and I wouldn't say begging because everyone has a responsibility and accountability to these women, to our First Nations communities, and this work needs to get done. And so either you're a part of the solution or you're not. So I just wanted to make those comments regarding this landfill search. We are going to do that work. Miigwech.
We're good?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Oh my goodness.
Right on.